Look at it go. Hee. Forest, buddy. Good lord. Of course, he waits right until I get started. Oh, here it is. This one. Make sure that it is exactly 4 inches. Because that's what I set it up for. We're just going to start by doing all of the colors. And then we don't want brother, we want brother. Not that it really matters because it looks different on the machine than it does on the program anyway. And then both the program and the machine look different from what the colors actually are. So this is just for my sake more than anything, let's be honest. And actually, we want our stitches to be... This is also just because I think this will look nicer to have the stitches going out from the center of the sun. So then they'll all kind of jump around. And I'll adjust the direction everybody's going. And then the green and red points are just the starts and the stops for each piece. So it'll start wherever the green is at, and it will stop stitching wherever the red is at. Which is what we want. What I don't want is like funky lines, which sometimes happens. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, see, there's kind of a funky horizontal line there that we don't really want. So we're gonna force it to stitch in such a way so then all the funkiness is just right here, and it's gonna mostly be covered up by our black line art when we go back around and do the black. Alright, this orange does not feel very orange. To be fair, I didn't pick a very pumpkin orange. Like I said, it doesn't really matter on the program because it'll change and be different on the machine. I'm going to use whatever thread's orangey anyway, so at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that our color actually goes all the way around each shape. And in my experience, it's best to have overlap between your fill colors and then do your line art on top of that. Because then if there's no gapping on any of your stitching, which because this one has so much stitching to it anyway, I am going to make sure I put down a stabilizer. It's extra strong for this one because the machine struggled with the last one, keeping the stitches straight, so. There we go. And that should be all of our orange pieces. So the biggest thing when we're doing this too is that it ends here, starts over here. You want to make sure there's a decent enough jump. Because like here to here, starts here, ends here, starts here. So it's jumping from here to here, that's fine. And it's jumping across here. We just want to make sure they're not too close together, because then what it'll do, instead of cutting and then moving on to the next piece, it will see, like this I don't like. So I'm going to swap this a few pieces up, and then it'll jump around a little bit. But it's better that it jumps around a bit than everybody sitting right next to each other and dragging strings across the embroidery. Because then we'll have random long loose strings. This is too fast for me to see what it's doing. Ends there. Starts there, ends there, starts there. Yeah, now see, I don't like... Because I'm pretty sure those both... Starts and ends there. Yeah, I don't really like that one either. There we go, that's a better jump. And that should be good. So now we can do our reds. And we're gonna switch that color. There we go. And like I said, it's best for us to have some overlap. There we go. Between our shapes anyway. Just because we want to make sure that those actually get filled. And then we'll come back over it with the black liner. That's okay. We'll finish our shape and then we'll adjust it. I might be able to do a satin stitch for the line art, which is really what I prefer to do for line art. But it's not always feasible. Just because sometimes like this whole thing, the entirety of this big box here is only 4 inches. You see from -2 to +2 on the ruler. So the issue we run into is that there really is only so much space. So even if we do a really thin satin stitch, it might not be thin enough for the line art, especially in some spots. Which is the important thing, is that we fill out the line art. Now the hardest part is I can't really do line weight with my embroidery. I think that is something that can be done in this program, but I don't pay for the super expensive versions of this program, so I just have to level 1. So I think you might be able to do that in later, more professional versions, but for the basic version, I don't have that ability to taper my satin stitches. Which I could do, technically fill shapes all over the place. And then these should be, the red should be far enough in general that this isn't a concern anyway as far as the jumping issue. So now I can move on to our yellow pieces. Yay! And I could try, like, I'll probably do just a little circle of black infill right here. I'm not entirely sure about that yet, though. Because I just find that, like, doing certain stitching for line art looks better than others, you know? Like, I don't want to really do fill stitching on line art because it just doesn't look as good for that. I prefer personally to do a satin stitch, but I'm gonna change the color of this guy to yellow. Like you see, there's some occasional little gaps here. We don't necessarily like those gaps. Just because sometimes that means there is no stitching there, and then the fabric shows through, and we don't want that. I would rather have the red show through than the blue fabric background that we're going to do. Having that little bit of overlap is always a benefit. Come back. Oh, for fuck's sake. There we go. That looks weird. Why do you look like that? Whew. Okay, that's... Oh, I see, because the whole thing was... There we go. That was really weird that it would be like that. There we go. Now these ones will have to make sure that the start spots aren't all in the middle, because then they'll be really close to each other that way, and that'll be a problem. But I don't think that's going to be much of an issue on this one either, because a lot of them are like on these curved parts, aside from this one. Just because that helps the shapes come out more nicely for what we want. Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to do that black infill there just to be safe. Right here in the middle where you don't have anything. Drag this orange down a little bit. This orange down a little bit. That looks pretty good. So now we're just gonna make sure ends there, ends there. Yeah, see, this one's in the middle, and then that one's right in the middle. That's a problem. See, so we'll just swap the orders. So this one will go to this one. Ends there, starts there. Ends there, starts there. Ends there, starts there. And then that works out. Okay. So that's all those ones. Making good progress so far. So now I'm just going to fill in this kind of gappy little spot. In fact, actually I'm going to adjust it a little bit because we don't want it. You want it overlapping, but we don't want it interfering. And then we don't care about direction for this one because this is mostly going to get covered up by the line art. There we go. So now that spot's filled, which is good. I might end up having to do some more fill-ins around like the points here where there's a lot of extra space, but we'll see. We're going to start with we're actually going to work our way from the back inwards because the embroidery is going to layer on top of itself. So I want to do these back petals first. And we're going to go like so. Yeah, see, that's thick as fuck. We don't want that. We're gonna go as small as it can go. That actually isn't bad. That's pretty good thickness. Just add a little bit of a curve there. Nice. And then I think I'll actually just go around and do the center ones first. Because then I don't have to remember and fiddle with the thickness of all of them. So we'll just ring around the rosy. Actually, whoop, I should change something. These, because they're so small, if I go over here, they don't need a zigzag and they don't need a parallel. That will save us a lot of stitches, which will keep us from getting too thick. I can actually bring up this view here. This just shows, it's very crazy looking, but this just shows like all these little red spots are where there's a lot of stitching overlapping and stuff like that, and the yellow is where some parts are kind of dense, and the blue is generally, the blue and the green are generally the best that you want. So we're trying to avoid as much red as possible. I'm not too concerned about yellow, but definitely avoiding as much red as possible. And you do that by reducing how much stitching it's actually doing, which these you can see is 130 stitches. I guess you might not be able to see it because it's actually off the screen for you. But you can reduce the stitches by reducing things like parallel and zigzag and satin borders. But like this one little piece right here as a satin stitch is 150 stitches just on this little black line that I just drew, which is a lot of stitches. So we might actually want to go back and adjust these, maybe? We want them to be touching the other lines, but we don't necessarily want a ton of overlap. Because like I said, that'll make stuff very, very thick, which we also don't want. Like right here probably doesn't need that much overlap. To there is probably plenty. Same for here, I probably overdid it a little bit. And to there is probably plenty. We'll be doing thicker borders for that anyway. We just want to make sure when we go back and do them that they actually touch/overlap a little bit, which at this point with all the stitches down, there shouldn't be too much squash and stretch really at all at this point. And like I said, I'm going to put down a nice stabilizer, so hopefully between that and the directional stitching, there shouldn't be any real issues with colors going places they're not supposed to. Now see, this one I think I did a little bit too much overlap with. There we go. Now keep in mind too, this satin stitch right here, these black lines I'm doing, are only 1 millimeter wide. So they are really small. It doesn't seem like it, but they are really small. Like we can actually go view, no, zoom, there we go, 1:1. And this is the exact scale, which is the exact scale for me, but for you guys, depending on what you're watching on, it might be bigger, smaller, whatever, you know. It's not a thick line at all, which is why we have to be so particular about our overlaps and things like that, because even the littlest bittiest of shifting can cause issues when you're working with line work this small. And then with this, we actually do want it to go to the center. Because we don't necessarily want to see that black that we did earlier. Which actually, that is a thing. That's another thing I have to change. Whoop! There we go. I have to go back and change that. All of this fill, I need to change the density of, because it's way too dense by default. So I'm going to go around, I'm going to go piece by piece and switch it, which I should have switched the settings in the first place, because then I wouldn't have to do it piece by piece. But this will also reduce a lot of stitches, because we're going from 17 to 32, which just reduces the density. I generally find it like the default length of stitches is fine. It's interesting, the program, because there are some things it will remember, like it will remember your stitch length and stuff that you use, but it won't remember the more specific details, which is kind of annoying, because God knows I don't have the best memory. There we go, and then that should be all of their infills. Which should have dropped us by, you know, a few hundred stitches. Which you can see right here, it's pretty dense where these satin stitches are. Like I said, as long as we're avoiding those as much as possible. Yeah, because now it's not doing, if I slow this down for you guys, speed it up a little bit, there we go. Now when it does, it's going to do the outline of the shape, and then it's going to go across and do like these parallels. That's what that setting changes, is it reduces the amount of those parallels that it's doing, which is very important. The parallels help provide structure and keep your stitches from moving in ways you don't want them to, but they also increase the density on your stitches, which is not always great. Like this center spot is almost definitely going to be very, very dense, just because all of these satin stitches are coming in here, meeting kind of at this point. Which also means I'm probably going to have to back up these center ones, just because I think actually once when we do our fatter line art, we won't have any issue with that. Back these up so they end where the individual, I guess, petals end. And we'll call that good. And now we get to do the fatter ones. which again, we're going to start with the ones on the bottom because we want overlap. And we're going to see what thickness. Like, yeah, that's not thick enough at all. So we'll see, what does 2mm look like? 2 actually might be too thick. What if we do 1.7? I don't know what it's doing here. I don't know what this is about. But yeah, see, and then we run into this issue where... There we go. That doesn't look too bad. That looks pretty good. So we'll do that thickness for those lines in particular. And then I just want to double check too that we are still, yeah. But yeah, so now if we go and we look here, we can see that it's getting pretty thick right where these points are meeting and overlapping, because this is where the colors overlap, this is where these satin stitches overlap, and it's getting a little thick, but that's okay. As long as we don't have super large sections of heavy red stitching. Because we are doing this on a thinner cotton fabric, and even though I'm going to use a stabilizer to help stabilize it, we don't want it to be basically tearing the fabric a new one, because that would suck, obviously. I do kind of want this to like so, though. That's better. Another big thing when you're programming, especially for more complicated embroidery like this, is that it's important that you program to scale. So like this is the size that it is going to be. It is going to be, I mean, technically it's not taking up the full 4-inch space, but it is going to be about 3.5 inches in size, in diameter. Which is important. Because if you try to scale it, what'll happen is the machine will try to figure out what to do with the stitches, and a lot of the stitches aren't going to look the way they did on the program. What are you doing, buddy? So unsmooth. I wanted to keep that nice curve there, and it just was not cooperating with me. Yeah. Alright, so now that's all of those. And again, we just want to make sure that start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Ooh, reversing it. Starting, stopping. Starting, stopping. Starting, stopping. Which I mean, you can see all of the jumps are the dotted lines on the screen, but it is kind of confusing to say the least. Ooh. So now we can go in and we can do our big boy lines. Zoom, zoom. We're going to start on the side that isn't going to the center. I don't actually think I'll have to scale up these ones too much. Yeah, no, that's a fine width for all of it, honestly. I'm just gonna tweak some of the positioning. Oh, that's just a little ridiculous. There we go. Yeah, see, and then we're now having to fill in that gap with the colors and line art below it, just to make sure it all gets filled in. And actually, I didn't notice this earlier. This guy is getting a little excited for his own good. There we go. Actually, bring him just a tidbit more. Calm down. There we go. Yeah. It's an early day even for me. Oh, this is going to be the hard part, isn't it? Gosh darn it. I should be doing these in the reverse order that I'm doing them. Because now we have this here, which I don't particularly like. There we go. See, because that's a much nicer overlap, I think. So we'll jump back over here, I guess. And we'll go in the reverse direction. So that way we keep having that nice overlap that we want. What is this shape? There we go. We'll pull this guy up just a bit more so that he covers that up. Then that means we'll pull this guy up a bit. That's better. This does not need to be. See, I thought I saw an extra black line there. And I don't know what this guy is doing, but I'm gonna need him to not. And then I do think actually I might be able to get rid of that black centerpiece. I'm not sure yet. I know there is also a way for me to change how the ends of these look. Not that that's something I'm currently concerned about. And then our biggest thing is right here. Whoop. We have no real way to make that go under because it is going to be the last one stitched. So we just really need to make sure that that comes in nicely so that it kind of blends along that shape. I mean, yeah, actually, we might not need that shape at all. We'll just there we go. Bring those all into the center nicely. That actually doesn't look bad. There's a lot of little red dots though, unfortunately. But it shouldn't be an issue. Shouldn't be an issue at all. Yeah. So we're just gonna double check and make sure that everything is going to stitch the way we want. And then we'll get to actually embroidering it. Which is honestly going to be the hardest part of all this. But once when we're done with this, I think we'll call that good for stream, and I'll do everything else off of stream. Oop. That's what I get. I clicked away and now it doesn't want to. Gosh darn it. There we go. Can actually speed that up a little. That's too much speeding. I always like how I find it really satisfying to watch the stitching for the embroidery machines. Like watching this is satisfying, but it's even more satisfying when you can actually see it with the thread and fabric. Less satisfying because you have to actually change color, but So at this point, I'm just making sure that all the stitching directions are going the way I want. It's stitching nicely how I want. And so far, it's looking pretty good. There's a couple spots that I know I can't fix just because that's the way it is. Because of the shapes themselves. But other than that, it's looking pretty good. All of our teeny tiny little satin stitches. And it's entirely likely that some of the color will peek through a little bit from underneath the satin stitches, but I don't think it's going to be anything particularly noticeable either way, so... And so far all the satin stitches look good too. Bless you, bud. You good? You gonna make it? Do not jump over that. The baby man's is trying to commit crimes. Okay, see, I feel like that one did a lot of... Nope, it sure didn't. Okay. Oh, we can skip a little bit. You see, why did this one do it 3 times? That's weird. Because like you see, the rest of them only did 2 passes. It might just be the start and stop direction that it did. I don't really know, honestly. The machines, they work in mysterious ways. Whatever floats its boat, as long as it's stitched nicely and it's not too dense, we're good. But this is going to be a bit of a thicker embroidery. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Good stuff. So we should actually do what we should have done this whole time, and we should save it. We're gonna call it Sun. The sun is a deadly laser. Did I save it as both? Oh, uh-oh. No, stop, please. Oh, thank God. I was scared for a second. Alright, but that should be good. We'll call that good. And then we'll leave it here, since this is all we're doing today. I'll get this embroidered on the new fabric, and while that's embroidering, I'll hopefully pattern the bodysuit for this commission. And then we'll have a whole other bandana and some of a bodysuit ready to go. So huzzah! And I will see you guys on, what's today? Today's Thursday. So I'll see you guys on Monday. Huzzah!